Well, as we said, 8,500 U.S. troops are being put on alert, and today we saw live pictures of U.S. military equipment heading to the Ukrainians today, what Ian was talking about. They're part of the $200 million in security assistance. And Ian, all of these moves are happening very publicly. They're not just sending the weapons, they're telling everybody they're sending the weapons. So joining us now to discuss all of this, Mick Mulroy, who's the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East and is now an ABC News national security and defense analyst. Mick, good to see you again. So what do you think? Are these actions going to back down the Kremlin, or will they make Russia feel more threatened and really want to pull the trigger quicker rather than wait till there's more resistance to what Putin might want to do here? How do you read it?
So I think these actions are exactly what we should be doing, putting 8,500 troops on alert, probably to deploy to a NATO country, is the message we need to be sending to President Putin. Sometimes strategic ambiguity does work, but with Russia threatening to invade a sovereign country, I think the directness of this, plus the message from both the United States and our NATO allies that any incursion into the Ukraine will be met with swift and severe economic sanctions, are the type of moves that we should be doing now. And the addition of the some 80 tons of weapons that we just saw in Ian's report arriving in the Ukraine are exactly what we should be doing to show strength and resolve of NATO in the face of Russian aggression.
And so there is that confrontation at this point, merely in theory, between the armed forces of first Russia and Ukraine right across the border, and NATO finding ways to back up Ukraine. And then there's the war words that's going on. I want to ask you about the comments from Putin's spokesman. He blamed the U.S. for the escalating tensions. They always do. He says the U.S. and NATO have been engaged in what he called, quote, information hysteria around Ukraine by reporting lies and fakes. Now, I've spent a fair amount of time in Russia. You know, Putin is a master, one of the inventors, really, of fake news in some ways. Disinformation he acknowledges it's part of his philosophy of governing. So how do you read what the Russians are trying to do here? They've issued a series of demands. They've massed troops on the border, and now they're saying it's our fault.
Yeah, so first of all, Terry, I think we should all be hoping that the diplomatic effort is successful. A conflict of this type is going to be bad for everyone, obviously the Ukraine, but also Russia and NATO. This has a serious potential for expanding dramatically. If Russia invades, likely they will be met with an opposition force, but that opposition force will soon turn into an insurgency, and they will look for safe havens in places likely in NATO countries, and that expands this quite dramatically. I would say, to the point of your question on these comments, this is a crisis of Russia's own making, and their actions have led to the things that they claim to be concerned about. NATO likely will be bolstered. That is going to increase with activity, exercises, because we have to be able to protect ourselves. We have an absolute obligation to do so, and the United States is showing that. So Russia should take this opportunity to de-escalate their actions, and hopefully this will end with a diplomatic solution rather than an actual conflict that could increase and expand rapidly to nobody's benefit.
Absolutely. And I want to pick up on something you said there. There have been, now for years, for many years, there have been conferences and debates. Wither NATO, right? What's the purpose of NATO after the fall of the Soviet Union was established to defend Western European free nations against the Soviet Union, which had subjugated nations? And after the Soviet Union fell, there was a question, is NATO really relevant anymore? It seems like this chapter that Vladimir Putin initiated has revived the relevance of NATO, and it feels like deja vu all over again for a lot of Americans. Is it really that we're going back to a time when there is a cold border at the very least, and the threat of a hot war between the Kremlin and the United States in Europe?
So I think that's an excellent point. He's essentially created a scenario where NATO is now very, very relevant on the world stage. I would argue it's the most successful military alliance in history. It didn't go away. It obviously fought alongside us in Iraq and Afghanistan. But now, to your point of your question, it is very relevant. And when you have these authoritarian states like Russia, who find it in their ability to go ahead and invade a sovereign country, which they already did in 2014, and they're threatening to do now. NATO is very relevant and will only continue to be so with these type of activities by countries like Russia.
Which you'd think would be exactly the opposite of what Vladimir Putin would have wanted, and the next leader of Russia will have to deal with. Mick Mulroy, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.